many people out there who will feel like you did, that one day I am going to run my own business, and there's always but it may be next year because the kids are going to be in place, or it might be next year because actually the market might be a bit better. There's always next year in that sense. So what advice would you give to someone out there that's maybe in that position now and sees you have done this in your life and maybe thinking I should do it? What's the thing that can maybe send them over the edge in a positive way to go and just take the risk?
I think it's always much easier if you've got a partner.
Yeah.
But realize the fact that may not last.
Yeah.
But if you are going to do it with a partner, do it right. Get a shareholder agreement in place. Do not make it 50-50 under any circumstances. Get someone else that can unlock it. It doesn't matter if it's 2%, whatever. You got someone else there. That will save you a lot of hassle and bother and all that, because you start off with thought that we're going to become a global empire and various other things and all that sort of jazz, and things come up. It's not as easy as you think. It's hard work, but it's great work, and you'll love it.
Hello and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that James Beazley has joined me in the studio today. I've known James for a long time. It's lovely to get to know his story in a bit more detail. So James, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks very much, Andrew. Very excited to be on here. I've listened to a number of your others before, and hopefully I can live up to the expectations of the quality of those. But really looking forward to speaking with you today.
Excellent. I am as well. We always start by just getting to know our guest a little bit. So tell us a little bit about you personally and professionally, and where your current focus is.
Yeah, great. So if you're wondering, those that are listening, about the twang in my voice, I'm from Sydney, Australia. I'm not a Kiwi and I'm not a South African. Firmly an Australian, very proud Australian. Although my accent's rounded out slightly, having lived in the UK for 20 years now. And I'm kind of getting to that point where I've lived outside of Australia longer than I've ever lived in Australia, which is quite a thing to confront you. Personally. In terms of my background, though, I lived and studied in Australia, studied law, practiced it for 2 weeks, hated it and left, and got into management consulting. And then I did a whole range of different things, from the national electricity market through to working with the government, and then eventually ended up in this thing called recruitment with a very big American firm, who then sent me to China, and I was responsible for working for TMP, is the name of the company, and Monster.com, and that was a fantastic experience running North Asia. And then Shell headhunted me, and I joined Shell working within HR talent, and then on some of their technical and refineries businesses there with Shell Global Solutions. And then they eventually sent me to here, the UK, where I ended up, in fact, first meeting you actually when I was at Shell those years ago, and I was managing experienced hiring and all of the executive talent across Shell group of companies, and then which brought me to the UK. It was only supposed to bring me to the UK for a very short amount of time, but as it transpired, I then left Shell and set up the company you can see behind me now, which is Six Group. I'm married. I've got 3 kids. I married a posh Scouser who I met in Sydney, and as I said, we've got 3 kids now who are grown up, and I play a lot of tennis, and I play in a midlife crisis rock and roll band for the last 15 years.
So you can remind us which instrument you play.
I play a few actually, so mostly guitar, but I also play keyboard or trumpet and do a bit of backing singing as required.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully we can get a bit out of that later on. Let's go back to where this podcast really focuses in terms of those early childhood experiences. Obviously, you're out in Australia, and how they shape that early leadership style. So we learn things, we take it in, we don't know what we're doing necessarily, we're just doing it. It seems to work for many of us. So just talk to us about those experiences.
It's interesting was when you gave me the preparation on this, and I was thinking I've never really sat down and actually thought about what in my early childhood has really affected my leadership style, particularly in those early formative years of becoming a first-time team leader or something like that. And so, and when thinking about it, it might sound pretty passé and glib, but my father actually probably was quite an inspirational figure for me. And I think with everyone, it depends what your family life was like. And we had a very stable, middle-class Sydney lifestyle and family. But in terms of what my father was exposed to, he was a conductor, so a musical conductor. And he used to do musicals across Sydney with musical societies and then bigger ones, in the city and various other things. And he was probably what I would describe the Liberace of conductors. And he was quite camp and artistic in how he uses his hands. And I now do exactly the same, I've got to say. My mum says, God, you're becoming more like your father every day. But it's he'd wear these fabulous jackets that would come out. And people would want to see what jacket was it Robert was going to wear next when he came out. But he used to put a tremendous amount of effort into this, having to write scores and the coordination of it. And he would never get flustered. And he was the consummate networker. And that was on the conducting side. But on the other side, he was a teacher, a school teacher for many years as well, but was also very heavily involved. And he was the musical director of the cathedral in Australia. And he studied at Addington Palace in Royal School of Church Music and various other things. So we were always thrown into a situation as children where I had to deal with adults a lot at the time. And I got to see what it was to network and to get a network of people, of influential people, particularly within the arts across Sydney. And that brought us some sort of level of ability to influence people who are actually in a different social strata to us. And I could see how my dad and how my mum operated as actually middle class. We weren't earning huge amounts of money, I've got to say. And that was very prevalent for me. I could see that, every kind of 5 or 6 years, we would have a real crunch time on money. We'd have to go to my grandfather or something like that. And so from a leadership perspective, there were a couple of things that informed how I was in the 20s and 30s, which was, one, I was going to get a job where money was not going to be ever an issue for me. And there was that inbuilt drive, that almost lack of self-confidence or self-worth to constantly have that ambition to go beyond expectations, which meant I demanded that out of the people that I actually managed. And so probably drove them quite hard, I've got to say. And then, but on the other side was this amazing ability to be able to communicate with people of all different levels and not necessarily be that. I was never really that afraid of speaking to very senior people. And because of that, I had a certain level of confidence because I could just talk to them. And I could talk to them on a whole range of subjects, from opera to classical music to modern day to this and various other things that we were involved with. So from that perspective, I think it allowed me to be seen as someone who could operate at a level beyond their years and have a maturity beyond their years. I think that kind of informed a little bit. It's all my girlfriends were always older than me, and when I dated someone who was younger than me, I didn't have the connection. And even my wife today, who I've been very happily married to for 25 years. I mean, she is also older than myself as well, and that level of maturity and being like that as someone young, I think, kind of informed how I saw I should be acting as a person, individual contributor, and then eventually into a team leader role.
Love that, and it'd be good to dip into later on how that then changed, because we mature and something either happens to us or we're cognizant of it or we're coached or whatever. We'll come to that. But at this point, I'm really interested to know, bear in mind that family environment you've grown up in, what were the dreams that you were having at that point? So in terms of what you wanted to make of your life in your 20s, what was it then? Sometimes it's nothing for people, sometimes it's really clear. What was it for you?
Okay. When I was 16, I wrote a list.
Great.
Of things that I wanted to achieve by the time I'm 55.
Yeah.
Still got the list. Actually, I should have bought the list here to show you, but anyway, still got the list. And it was all these things I wanted to kind of achieve. They're both personally, but also professionally. And at that time, it must have been around that time or something, but Richard Branson was pretty high on my list of entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurialism was not a thing in my family. So my mum's twin brother, yeah, everyone has the rich uncle or the rich person or the successful person. He was it. Uncle Kev was it. And he went off and had a great career with Nestle, and he became extremely senior with Nestle across Asia Pacific. And then he was the rich uncle and did very well. And he was great. And so he was about as entrepreneurial as I would have within my family. All the rest were teachers or government or bank or something like that. So, but then this guy, Richard Branson, came along and stuff as well. And so I was very much focused on wanting to do that. And it was pretty materialistic, I would say, when I look at the list now. Right up to, by the age of 55, I need to have my own private island. It's the only thing I have not ticked off that list that I've got. And I'm telling you, I am going to get there, but it may not be at 55. But there were other things. And it's interesting because there was one stage where I thought I wanted to become a foreign diplomat. And so in the equivalent of A-level here in the UK, year 11, year 12 in Australia, all the subjects I did were focused around actually getting into the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and becoming that. Even university, and I went all the way through that, applied, got all the way to the final interviews and didn't get it. And they never tell you why you didn't get it, so you don't get that feedback. I don't know what it's like here in the UK, but it's so I didn't get it, so I had to change my direction quite considerably. And that's where I was lucky enough to land a job with the first a law firm that came out of that 2 weeks later, but the management consulting firm. And that kind of showed a whole different world to me. It was quite entrepreneurial, even though it was linked with McKinsey and various other things, but it was solely focused on China and my skill. And then when I saw a very inspirational, charismatic leader doing deals and making money, and that was quite influential, I would say, as me as a young buck going for it in Australia. And I thought, yes, I want to kind of go down that route a little bit.
Yeah.
And that was largely driven also with the money thing. So, with mum and dad, every now and then, so I really did make a vow that whatever I do in life, I want to get to the point where I don't need to be ultra rich or anything, but just comfortable where I don't have to worry or think about that, and that there is provision for family and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. I've still got that today, I've got to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes as being resourceful, and sometimes there are pros and cons with that. But what I'm really interested in is you obviously became very adept to different cultures as well. You explained with the run through that you had around the career, that's obviously helped you. But I'm interested in, at what point did you flip that thing from being that young, driven individual, managing and leading that way, to something that was very different in the sense of leading people differently because you had to?
Probably, you would say when I was in China and managing a predominantly Chinese mainland population of staff, and then of course then having to deal with Hong Kong, Korea, Taiwan, that type of stuff. But to be honest with you, I think I actually managed that in the same way as I managed in Sydney. And it wasn't until I got to Shell.
Yeah.
Shell has a very specific culture, and at the time when I joined it, I can't comment on it now, but at least when I was there, it was definitely a culture that was led by a consensus-driven decision-making culture, very Dutch in that respect rather than British, I would say. They had this concept of feedback, which can be a very powerful concept, as we all know, but provided it's used in the correct way. And at Shell, it was a very toxic way. If they would come to you and say, "Can I give you some feedback?" Say, "Yeah, sure, it'd be fantastic." And then they'd tell you everything they don't like about you, but under the guise that it's feedback. So it changed my leadership style quite a bit, because I think up to that point, I was pretty good at being pretty diplomatic. But Shell gave me some pretty thick skin, because I had some very tall, very dominant alpha Dutch males telling me, "I will tell you what to do." And I think, bucked up against that a little bit and started to become a little bit more forthright in how I position myself. And I think to my detriment, I would say, a little bit in that particular context. So and it kind of gave me a bit of a slap in the face a little bit on that, and trying to figure out how do you be successful in this system. And a lot of companies, this concept of, companies having a system and that people are able to become truly effective in that system. It's normally very big companies. It's from an executive search perspective. I always talk about this with candidates that come into interview with us. If you're with Korn Ferry or one of these, you can become very effective at operating within Korn Ferry, not necessarily be an amazing business developer or great at client relationships, but very effective at knowing how to become successful within that system. At Shell was very good at doing business with Shell.
Yeah.
So me as a manager then, I can when I reflect on it now, I can see that I was really changing the way I was managing, the way I was speaking, the way I was actually proposing things. The whole time I was very successfully becoming brainwashed by Shell and management culture. And of course, believing that Shell is pretty much the gold standard, the best thing in the world. And actually, a lot of companies are very good at inculcating that type of culture and that loyalty to that. And if you speak to Shell people today, most of them always talk very fondly, and a lot of what they do in their current thing, they've taken a lot of the best of Shell and taken that. And I have definitely at Six, that's for sure. But it definitely changed the way I led people, and I had to listen more. I had to calm down a little bit, but every now and then someone would press my button and I would react emotionally, which I don't think I would have done in my 20s or 30s. And to an extent, actually, it's funny because it still happens to me today. But it's, and I was talking about this with the staff today, in actual fact, and it's probably another life moment I had very early on in my life that is more or less coming back now that I have had kids and seen them go through high school and go through some of the pressures and things around bullying. I had a very nasty bullying incident when I was younger, and eventually police got involved and various other things, someone bullying me. And this concept of when I feel someone has done something that is unfair to one of my staff or to my business or to myself, I can really take some pretty heavy umbrage against it, and therefore I have a tendency to react to it. And I have to work very hard to keep myself. You feel that physical change in your chemistry inside. You feel that tension in your chest. You feel the heartbeat go slightly quicker because you're wanting to just come back at them straight away.
Yeah.
But of course, that's not going to do anything, and it might make you feel good for 10 seconds, but it could destroy a relationship. It could do various other things. So I know as a leader now, I have to work really hard on that. The older I get, the more I'm getting to that point where I don't really care what people think of me sometimes. I'm not striving now to have this wanting to make an impression with people and those types of things. You've known me for a number of years. I'm pretty direct and I'm pretty straight, and but also I love talking and we'll get out there and those types of things. If something's coming up like that, and my wife said it to me the other day, she said, I think you've actually got a bit of a hangover from this. I probably do. I probably need some counselling on it, but not that this is a counselling session, but in light of the questions you gave me, I think it's pretty powerful to actually think that something like that actually is affecting me more now than maybe what it did in my 20s and 30s.
What's interesting there, James, is there's for the audience listening to this as well. There's a couple of great books. One written by Thomas Hubel called Attuned, and there's another great book called by Gabor Mate called The Myth of Normal. And what they both talk about, and have done lots of research in, is that not only do we manifest trauma from our childhoods, which we try to block out, and it could be a bullying incident or something else, which then manifests later in our lives when we're triggered by a similar parallel event happening, and it all comes out again. We feel it in our bodies. And it's really tuning into that, hence attuned, and really understanding its intelligence for us, an insight, and we can do something with it as opposed to just repress it. And it comes out in different ways. But secondly, the interesting thing is that many people aren't aware that this is happening. And indeed, in Gabor Mate's book, he talks about intergenerational trauma. It's our parents and their parents, and we're born with it. So if this is true, and we all accept as human beings that we have some of this within us when we're born, then at least we can view it differently and work with it differently and see it maybe as a gift as opposed to as it sometimes gets in the way. So I appreciate you sharing that. And that might lead into this decision that you made in your life, where what I've heard you say, I'll go back to Branson because I think you said this on LinkedIn a few months ago, but he's convinced that most human beings have the ability to show preneurial type skills, whether that's an entrepreneur, in an organization, which you were doing in many of the organizations you're working in China, etc., or eventually entrepreneur, when that individual gets to a stage in life where it's got to be expressed freely by setting up their own business or jointly founding something. So with that kind of language in mind, what was it for you as you were going through the latter stage of your career as a preneur before you became the entrepreneur fully?
I'd always thought I wanted to have my own business. I think there's definitely the fear of failure, which stops people from making that step, I think, or the fact of it's the lack of stability, maybe. But it was an interesting dynamic because we made this. I say we because I used to have a business partner as well, who was fantastic colleague, very good friend of mine at Shell, and we made the decision to go from Shell, and we thought it was all the economic factors were there. There was a massive peak in hiring for, as you can remember, oil and gas and all that sort of stuff. We thought if we don't do it now, we'll never do it, and we were in a pretty good position financially and stuff as well. So that's when we thought we'd do it, and we were very lucky that within the first week we set up, we literally got BP and Floor to sign contracts, and then the rest is history. So, we also had the opportunity where my business partner had his father stump up 10K just in case, and I had my mother-in-law, in actual fact, stump up 10K just in case we needed it, but we never touched it. And that really, and then once we got into it, we kind of realized, in actual fact, it's not as scary as you think. You just got to keep doing what you say you're going to do. And I think that was the actual doing. I know I'm a great ideas guy, but I'm pretty hopeless at complete a finisher, I think, which is why I hire people who are amazing at execution. And my wife, Jen, is a completer finisher. She's absolutely brilliant at that. And in actual fact, when I set up Six, the reason I was so encouraged and felt comfortable doing it was because my business partner was also an excellent completer finisher. And I was a bit more blue sky and this side of things and possibly had more of the charisma and out facing. But my business partner at the time, he was exceptional at that. I'll give him that every day of the week. And it's an interesting one because he probably wouldn't want to hear that now because later on down the track things didn't quite go according to plan, as sometimes happens in business. But hey, that's life. And so having that duality of the ability to have both this front end and the execution, I think really paid off for us because we got to a stable point pretty quickly. Once you get to that point, and from an entrepreneurial perspective, that it's in a really good place because you're quite free then to try things and do things. You can go ahead and try things, and if it works, it's great. And if it doesn't work, well, that doesn't matter. Just crack on and get on with other stuff. So, and then we'd always come up with certain crises, and perversely, I quite liked some of the crises. It was quite nice working through it, and in the Shell context or in the team, I hated it.
Yeah.
But in the context of having your own business, loved it. I thought it was a challenge, and I got through. And then when you do get through it, I think you had a greater sense of accomplishment. And it was, I think it was really feeding that checklist of when I was 16 of having my own business like Richard Branson. Nothing like Richard Branson, actually, but hey, I'm doing it. And that was the real turning point. It was Shell, and then coming there and market and just doing it.
Yeah, and you obviously learned through that, and you had certain circumstances. But if we take the premise that there are many people out there who will feel like you did, that one day I am going to run my own business, and there's always but it may be next year because the kids are going to be in place, or it might be next year because actually the market might be a bit better. There's always next year in that sense. So what advice would you give to someone out there that's maybe in that position now and sees you have done this in your life and maybe thinking I should do it? What's the thing that can maybe send them over the edge in a positive way to go and just take the risk?
I think it's always much easier if you've got a partner.
Yeah.
But realize the fact that may not last.
Yeah.
But if you are going to do it with a partner, do it right. Get a shareholder agreement in place. Do not make it 50-50 under any circumstances. Get someone else that can unlock it. It doesn't matter if it's 2%, whatever. You got someone else there. That will save you a lot of hassle and bother and all that, because you start off with thought that we're going to become a global empire and various other things and all that sort of jazz, and things come up. It's not as easy as you think. It's hard work, but it's great work, and you'll love it, and it's you doing it. And I think also we did it at a time where, we were taught the best of the best in terms of everything you can think of, from Shell, from TMP, McKinsey, Australia China Business Bureau, and all that sort of stuff, at least on my side. And on my business partner side, he also had a very good background. So we had a kit bag of knowledge and kit bag of processes, systems, and things of how to operate in a successful and bigger company, which we just literally overlaid in our own entrepreneurial little executive search firm. But it worked.
Yeah.
And I think if you're at a position where you've got that, and you've also have a very clear idea on your purpose and what you want to do and why you want to do it, then not much is going to stop you from doing it, really. And I'd try it. What's the worst that's going to happen? It doesn't work, go get another job.
Absolutely, I love that. That ties in.
And you probably would get a job as well, because you're a clever person and various other things. If you're at that point where you're thinking, I can actually set up my own business, normally means that you're pretty much in a situation where you can take that type of perceived risk.
Absolutely. And that ties into the next question I was going to ask you, in the sense of, I truly believe, and you've already mentioned it there, it doesn't matter if you're a leader of a business you founded or a leader in an organization. The only person that gets in the way of you being successful is you. And it's those self-limiting beliefs. Of course, there are things that go into investments, but it's our attitude towards those investments. It's our relationship with those stakeholders that gets in the way, which is why we see some other people being successful who seem to have a similar background to us. So it must be us. So as you are getting towards the latter stages of your career, obviously you've ticked off every single thing so far, apart from the island. So what is it you still find most challenging about you and the way you get in your own way? Now you're leading the business, obviously, as one rather than having a partner with you. What is it for you?
So this is your saboteurs a little bit type of thing, isn't it, I suppose? Or the dark sides where you overplay your strength. So I think me as a leader now, I have to really force myself on the complete to finish, execute side of things. But I've come up with mechanisms of how to deal with that. So I talk about this concept, you might have seen it before, and it was a manager that told me this. I've come to a point in my life and my career where I have become comfortable with my level of incompetence. I know what my incompetence is, and do I think I'm able to successfully bridge that to the point where it becomes just, normal modus operandi? No, but I'm comfortable with that. So I know I'm not really good. I know I have to expel a lot of energy when it comes to complete to finish. And when I do it, I can do it pretty well. And that does hold me back a little bit in terms of the aspirations that I have for this company at the moment. So, which means I have to really look for people who can actually help me do that. And and this is about this level of incompetence thing. So I know what I'm great at. I know what I'm not great at. So now I find people to plug the stuff that I'm not great at. And under this concept of what I call followership here, under our beliefs, followership isn't discipleship or anything like that. For me, it's more about, okay, I know I'm good at this. I'm going to take charge of this. But you, Andrew, are absolutely brilliant at this. And even though we have a hierarchy and stuff, I don't care. You're the leader on it. You tell me what to do. You get me to do what I have to do and stuff because you are it. And that is actually how Six never used to kind of be like that, but we are like that now. And so it's kind of coming to this collaborative performance. And so me as a leader has had to evolve now from being a fairly directive leader to far more collaborative, facilitating, coaching type of leader, which I far prefer actually. But I have to watch that still because I have a tendency to keep on looking at the bright next sparky thing and say, I've got to do this. Let's go do it and talk about it and jazz everyone up about it. And then it kind of falls by the wayside a bit because we get distracted by the core of what we've got to do. So I think sometimes I just got to keep focusing on the core of what we do rather than getting distracted by these other things. Does that answer the question or not?
It does.
It does, yeah.
No, it does. Yeah, no, it does. And there are some people, again, that don't become aware of what holds them back because they don't know what's really going on for them, or they don't invite feedback from people about how they are in relationships. And what you've talked about there allows the people in your team to actually step into that space which you want to vacate and allow them to grow even further. So no, I get that. We're coming towards the end of our time together, James, but I have got a couple of things to ask. So let's go back to what's yet to achieve for you. And I don't mean just the island. It's about, you're obviously in service, or you've got a great business there that you're driving. So what is there still left for you to achieve professionally? Let's start with that.
Professionally, I've just started embarking on this whole program of work around transformation, collaborative performance in running workshops and things like that. A bit more training, I suppose, compared to the executive search side of things. Absolutely love it. It's something I think I probably would like to do when I grow up. So, but from a professional perspective, Six have been on a journey. We've really just kind of relaunched all of this much more values-focused approach, and particularly around the planet side of things. So it's something I think is absolutely critical for all businesses to look at, and we as a search firm are trying to educate our clients as well as others that there isn't an A or B. Why can't you have A and B and still be extremely profitable and brilliant as well as amazing for the planet? And that is our whole purpose at the moment, particularly that people can drive that and people and performance can drive that. So it's a little bit of a kind of evangelistic type of message out there to show that actually people and clients and I can have some level of influence, I think, professionally within this. Above and beyond just Six could be for other search firms and other firms in our arena as well. So, and I'm doing that through B Corp, and B Corp is a great vehicle for that as well, and I love it. And professionally, it's opened my eyes up to something I would never have seen before, particularly from a Shell context. And so I've still got a lot to learn, and I'm loving that journey. Ultimately, I think as any entrepreneur would like to do, they'd like to realize some of the value out of what they've created. So, of course, that is definitely on the cards. And we have a very strict plan on how we're going to try and do that in the next 3 to 5 years. So, and everyone is on board with that as well. So that would actually really kind of cap off a very nice entrepreneurial career, I'd say, if I could do that as well for myself and the people here and the people who've been so great at contributing to who we are. And yeah, that's about it, really.
And personally?
Personally, in terms of what I want to achieve personally, I want to achieve... It's interesting that it's changed quite a bit. So how many more minutes have we got?
Oh, we're fine. No, we're fine.
Okay. Very, very quickly. I turned 50 3 weeks ago, and I'm the youngest of all of my community of friends here, but amongst the community of friends, 5 of them, 5 couples, out of all 5, one of them either has a non-curative cancer or has had a child, unfortunately, various things. And it's had quite an impact on me personally, and has had an impact on my community of friends personally as well, which is this view of you need to seize the moment right now and don't delay or procrastinate. If you want to do something, do it. If you want to go over and see something, do it, because you may not have the opportunity in the future. And that's really coming to the fore now. And so personally, I want to be at a state where I'm not having to put things off just because of money or something like that. And money, who cares about money? You can always figure it out somewhere along the line. But personally, now it's about being happy, being healthy, making sure my kids are happy, that places are shaped by the people you meet and your friends. And they're the greatest thing you've got as you get older. So don't lose them and keep them going. And that's my whole focus at the moment.
Love that. I've got one more sneaky question because it's just come to me as you were saying that, and it's the importance of those people around you. So I'm going to go back to where we started. And let's say I invited you to play an important family function tonight and pay your band to come and play for us. You had free choice of what you were going to open and finish with in the set. Which 2 songs would you go for?
I Predict a Riot to open because it's just brilliant, gets everyone up there. And in actual fact, every single set that we play, I close with Highway to Hell, and it is in my will that at my funeral, it will be played Highway to Hell because it's AC/DC, and I love it, and I sing it, and it's just brilliant. And that's the only reason I'd open and close with those 2 songs.
Fantastic. Well, I think on that note, James, we should close. Thanks very much for coming on to the show. I know that the audience would have been really interested in your career, those moments for you. Thank you for sharing everything you've shared today, and thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, I've absolutely loved it. I feel cleansed after this now. It's great. Thanks very much for that, Andrew.
Thanks, James.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.